So, spoiler season week 2 is here, and week 1, well, okay, it was like 2 days, but it was in the first week. You know what I mean? Had a lot of exciting cards, including Zyra. I think it's Zyra, the Golden Sting. So if you haven't seen that episode, make sure you check that one out. But don't leave just yet, because on this episode, I'm going to be talking about what might be my favorite new commander, and it's a spicy one at that. So, Xur is back with Xur Eternal Schemer, a 1/4 human wizard with flying that costs white, blue, black. Xur has enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, and by paying 1 and a white, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types and has base power and base toughness, each equal to its mana value. So, enchantment animation is here on a commander. I mean, we have seen some other commanders in the past be able to animate artifacts, essentially, but to my knowledge, this is the first time we're getting a commander that cares about enchantment animation, and that is something that I actually have been waiting for a while. Now, that might seem incredibly specific, but there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that here in a bit when I go through how I would like to build around this commander. I'm sure that might not be the common or most typical way that's built around this commander, but yeah, I have been waiting for a commander that allows me to turn enchantments into creatures. Because when your enchantments are creatures, there are some very powerful things that you can do with that. And I mean, again, at a base level, you could just turn your enchantments into creatures that are going to be pretty deadly. Again, Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof creatures, essentially. So if you just want to get a lot of enchantments out there and, just start turning them into creatures, permanently turning them into creatures in addition to their other types, have fun. And actually, keep in mind with that Hexproof, that can be a fantastic little trick where if you've got 2 mana open, or should I say, at least, 1 generic and, a white mana open, you can protect your enchantments from targeted removal. If an opponent's gonna, try to beast within one of your enchantments, you're just like, okay, now it's a creature with Hexproof. Sorry. So yeah, there's a lot of powerful and exciting things that you can do with this commander, including the way that I'm going to build around it. But yeah, if you are interested in any of the cards I'm talking about on this episode, like basically all the other quick takes I'm talking about, make sure you check out that link in the description below, where you can find the link to the list of the cards, that I'm talking about on this episode. Because, when new, exciting commanders are spoiled, sometimes cards that work really well with them tend to go up in price sooner rather than later, so consider picking up some of those. And now with all of that said, let's jump into it. So the first 2 cards that I want to talk about, and there's a good reason for this, just bear with me, are cards like Clever Impersonator and Replication Technique. Clever Impersonator is a clone that can basically copy any non-land permanent on the battlefield. And Replication Technique is a fantastic copy spell that says demonstrate, so basically you can, copy this card if you give an opponent a copy as well. Create a token that's a copy of target permanent you control. Now, the reason that I want to bring up these cards is that, well, in Magic, there really aren't all that many ways of copying enchantments. There are, yes, a few like these, but there aren't a ton. And of course, there are a lot of very powerful enchantments out there, and if you can get an extra copy of that, that's going to be an incredibly powerful thing. But of course, with this brand new commander, this brand new Xur, this completely changes the way that you can do things with copy spells or clones. Because now, no matter what kind of clone you have, like, the original clone, you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. When you can turn your enchantments into creatures, you can then clone them with, again, any clone. And there are a ton of clones out there. We've been getting more and more lately. I mean, like Undercover Operative, Mirehall Mimic, etc., etc., etc. Now, the way that this works, and please correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but essentially, yeah, again, Xur lets you turn one of your enchantments into a creature, in addition to other types, and has base power and toughness each equal to its mana value. So again, with your enchantment now being a creature, you can clone it with a clone, and yeah, it comes into play as a copy of that enchantment. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Because from what I read, essentially when you are copying something that you animated, again, usually this happens with artifacts, but now this is an enchantment, you are copying the card as it is written. So essentially, you're not going to be having it come into play as a creature, it's going to be coming into play just, as an enchantment, even though, again, the original version is an enchantment creature. Now, I am not a judge or a rules lawyer, so yeah, I could be wrong on that, but at the very least, no, yes, it is very possible to copy enchantments quite easily with a ton of spells out there. And whether or not these copies come into play, as creatures or not really doesn't matter, you still can turn them into creatures. And yes, when you are copying a card, you do get the actual, mana value or mana cost of that card copied as well. So you can utilize Zur to turn that clone copy into, a creature as well if you want to. So whether you're copying your animated enchantment with, Clone or Undercover Operative or Mirror Hall Mimic, or some other things that we'll talk about here in just a second, this opens up a lot of opportunities. Especially when it comes to spells that create token copies with cards like Quasi-Duplicate, Zindersplit's Judgment, and Saheeli's Artistry. Quasi-Duplicate is going to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and it's got Jumpstart so you can recast again from your graveyard. Zindersplit's Judgment says for each player choose friend or foe. Each friend creates a token that's a copy of a creature they control. Each foe returns a creature they control to its owner's hand. So this is a benefit for you, and obviously, in the vast majority of circumstances, a negative impact on your opponents. And then Saheeli's Artistry says choose one or both, create a token that's a copy of target artifact, or create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact as other types. So now basically you're going to have an enchantment artifact version of an enchantment that you're going to be making, as well as also copy an artifact too. Nevertheless, again, typically you would not be able to, obviously copy your enchantments with spells like these, but now with this new Zur, you can animate your enchantment to make it copied by a lot of things out there. And of course, because of that, then you can have some incredibly juicy targets that, well, I've been waiting to copy a ton for quite some time. So this deck would revolve around some high-powered enchantments with cards like Swarm Intelligence and Song of the World Soul, and things can get pretty out of hand with these. First up, Swarm Intelligence says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose targets for the copy. So yeah, again, even just having one of these in play can be incredibly impactful in a game of Commander, but thanks to this Commander and the ability to animate enchantments, we can make an absurd amount of copies with this quite easily. Especially with some of those spells that we just talked about that can copy creatures like, Quasi-Duplicate. So simply with Zur, again, you turn this enchantment into an enchantment creature, a 7/7 lifelinking, death-touching, hexproof enchantment creature at that, and then you simply just say, okay, I'm gonna Quasi-Duplicate it. Oh, and I get a copy of that as well, so I'm going to do that a second time. So then you get 2 token copies of Swarm Intelligence on the field. So now whenever you cast any instant sorcery spell, you're copying it 3 times. So then, we could just recast Quasi-Duplicate from our graveyard by jumpstarting it, and then, create even more token copies of Swarm Intelligence. I mean, that would be, 6 more copies of it? Because, we just cast it. We had 3 copies of Swarm Intelligence in play, or 3 total, whatever it is. And then we double it. So yeah, I think that's 6. So we'd have 6 more token copies of Swarm Intelligence, leaving us at 9 copies of it. Now, whenever we cast any instant or sorcery spell, we copy it 9 times. And obviously you can see where this is going and how this can get out of control, especially if we cast more and more copy spells. In a somewhat similar and very funny way, there's Song of the World Soul, which is a card that I have always wanted to be able to make more copies of. I love this one. Whenever you cast a spell, populate. And again, populating specifically means that you create a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. So again, with something like this, we'd say, okay, Zur, turn this into an enchantment creature, and then let's Quasi-Duplicate it so we get a token copy of it. Now again, if I am reading the rules correctly, I believe that token copy doesn't come into play, as a creature as well. But that really doesn't matter again all that much. All we'd have to do is actually just utilize Zur again to turn that token copy version of it into a creature too. So whether it works that way or not really does not matter. Regardless, we can have a creature token copy version of Song of the World Soul. And because of that, Now, anytime we cast a spell, and it does not matter what spell it is, we can populate that Song of the World Soul creature token, which of course is going to get more and more out of control with every single spell we cast, because we get more Song of the World Souls in play and we get more populate triggers. Essentially, we're just going to keep multiplying our Song of the World Souls, and of course, if we get other creature token copy versions of others, like, Swarm Intelligence, we can copy those too very easily. And yeah, this is the kind of play that I've been waiting to be able to do for quite some time, and there really hasn't been a commander that's allowed me to do that. So finally, with Zur, we have a way to animate an enchantment, and yeah, there are some really disgusting things you can do when you can animate enchantments and make additional copies of them. And of course, there are plenty of other disgusting enchantments that we want to get a lot of copies of, and yeah, even on a budget, there are some fantastic ones that can be incredibly impactful, like Martyr's Bond and Ethereal Absolution, just as some examples. Martyr's Bond says whenever it or another non-land permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a card type with it. Just imagine getting a couple of copies of this into play. Every single time one of your, enchantments goes away, your opponents are going to sacrifice an absurd amount of enchantments. Same goes for, creatures. Same goes for artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever, etc., etc., etc. It does say non-land, so I was reading through this one. I was like, oh, Evolving Wilds. No, that does not work. That would be quite mean. If you sacrifice an Evolving Wilds and your opponents had to sacrifice like 6 of them because you had 6 Martyr's Bonds in play, does not work that way. Still, again, if you just have a simple creature in play, and you've got 6 Martyr's Bonds in play, and you lose that creature, all your opponents have to sacrifice 6 creatures. This is a way to decimate armies, decimate boards. Good luck, opponents. And especially have good luck if we, again, have, 6 copies of Ethereal Absolution in play. It gives creatures we control +1/+1, creatures our opponents control -1/-1, and we can exile cards to make spirits. Regardless, if you have 6 of these in play, that's +6/+6 for all creatures you control, -6/-6 for all creatures your opponents control. They're never going to be able to keep creatures in play, and your creatures are massive and deadly. And again, your enchantment creatures also have Death Touch and Lifelink and Hexproof, and you can easily make an army of just unstoppable enchantment creatures that are going to be incredibly hard to deal with and incredibly deadly. And the fun doesn't stop there. Obviously, you can copy other things like, Jace's Sanctum, Sigil of the Empty Throne, Feldar Retreat. There are a lot of great examples of enchantments that you're going to want more than one of in play. Jace's Sanctum says, instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less cast. Whenever you cast instant sorcery spell, scry 1. Just imagine having, again, multiple copies of this in play. Again, with an example of, 6 copies or whatnot, which, again, is not hard to do once you get set up properly, especially when you've got things like Swarm Intelligence or Song of the World Soul to make copies very quickly. Yeah, 6 copies of this would be, all your instant sorcery spells cost 6 less to cast, so you're casting a lot of things for basically nothing. And whenever you cast any of those spells, you are scrying a ton. And of course, with all these enchantments in your deck, yeah, Sigil of the Empty Throne is going to be great. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Oh my goodness, just think about having 6 of these in play. Every single time you cast an enchantment spell, that's 24 power over 6 bodies with flying? Good luck, opponents. Or how about Feldar Retreat? Whenever a land enters battlefield under control, choose 1, create a 2/2, or put a +1 counter on each creature you control. They gain vigilance until end of turn. Multiple copies of this, even with just your land drop for the turn, is absurd. But of course, consider cards like, Evolving Wilds or Fetch Lands. Oh my goodness, just how quickly you can make an army and how massive you can make that army is absurd. Now, keep in mind that things can get even more absurd, especially with those token generators, with cards like Mirrorweave and Sakashima's Will. Mirrorweave says each other creature becomes a copy of target null legendary creature until end of turn. And Sakashima's Will says choose 1 if you control a commander. As you cast a spell, you may choose both. Target opponent choose a creature they control, you gain control of it. Choose a creature you control, each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. So again, say that you've got a token army from something like Feldar Retreat. Awesome. Now let's just make all of our things into a copy of our best enchantment creature on the board. So, if we've got like 30 creatures in play, which of course can be very easy for a deck like this to do once it gets set up, let's all make those copies of Song of the World Soul or Swarm Intelligence, and things can get incredibly disgusting from there. So yeah, there's a lot of potential for shenanigans with this kind of a deck. And again, there's a reason why I have been waiting for a commander that is about animating enchantments, because there's a ton of potential for it. And of course, the cards that I mentioned so far are all very budget friendly, but yeah, I mean, if you've got a higher budget, Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, Gross, Sphere of Safety, Wizards, please reprint Sphere of Safety. My goodness, that card is like $7 now. Please! But yeah, all of these obviously are disgusting cards on their own, and even more disgusting, of course, when you can copy them very easily, especially with a commander like this. As a quick reminder, Rhystic Study says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless the player pays 1. So yeah, great taxing effect. And if you get more and more of these taxing effects, it's going to be incredibly difficult for your opponents to pay for, well, any of them essentially. So yeah, you can draw an absurd amount of cards. Smothering Tithe, gross. Whenever an opponent draws a card, the player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create treasure token. 2 is far too much to pay whenever players draw cards. So yeah, you're going to get an absurd amount of tokens, especially again, whenever you create copies of this, you're just going to get an absurd amount of mana thanks to this. Sphere of Safety, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless the controller pays X for each of those creatures, X the number of enchantments you control. Players are basically never going to be able to attack you, especially the number of enchantments you can get into play, again, once you get things set up like a Swarm Intelligence or a Song of the World Soul. And of course, I mean, if you get extra copies of this, it's going to get even more absurd. And yeah, that X value is going to be impossible for them to pay, even for just one creature. And of course, you know, again, if you've got that higher budget Anointed Procession, yeah, that would be gross with this commander and this kind of, you know, cloning token creating concept. If an effect would create one or more tokens, then your controller creates twice that many of those tokens instead. Just think of, again, Zur animating this and then, you know, quasi-duplicating it, then doing that again, and the math is going to get pretty absurd. Now, is this the typical way that, you know, many players out there are going to build around this new commander? No, but it's my way, and I think it's going to be really fun. But now this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Zur Eternal Schemer. Again, I am really excited about this commander. I have been waiting for a commander that actually animates enchantments for quite some time because, again, there's a lot of potential for shenanigans when you can do something like that. And of course, I did mention it, but yeah, I mean, the fact that those enchantment creatures now have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof is incredibly relevant. I mean, it's going to be hard for your opponents to swing at you because the Death Touch is going to be easier for your enchantments to get through. You can gain a ton of life, and of course, that Hexproof probably being the most important part of that, because this is a great way to protect those enchantments by saying, okay, you're trying to get rid of it with a removal spell. Now it has Hexproof. I have stopped you from doing that. And yeah, this commander just has a lot of potential for a lot of different builds around it. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you are interested in some of the cards that I mentioned on this episode, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below, because again, when a new commander is spoiled, well, cards might go up in price sooner rather than later that work well with them. And of course, also make sure you stay tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes and spoilers coming up. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.